something that struck me while I was sitting there, listening to the remarks from Rob and Davis and Gretchen, was how similar the challenges we face in the Department of Labor and Workforce Development are with the challenges that you guys are facing now in the community college world. And in fact, it shouldn't be surprising because we all have the same mission, right? Our objective is to provide and help individuals identify opportunities for their next step, right? For their own family sustainability, for their own professional development. So it shouldn't be surprising that we have a lot of the same challenges. And it seems like my agency, all with very, very good intentions, has fallen into some of the same pitfalls that some of your operations have. When I was looking at that general requirements form that the guys put up, I sadly felt right at home. I was like, oh yeah, that's our on-the-job training application. Perfect. And so we have to, I think we are right now going through a process very similar to what Rob and Davis are talking about, some of these other institutions leading this kind of change. It's, and in fact, President Murphy used the phrase reducing the clutter or cutting through the clutter. That is exactly what we have to do. We have, in my agency, we have 75 different programs funded through some either federal program or state dollars or some combination of both. And if someone walks into one of our one-stop career centers, and let's say they are, in the hardest of hard times, right? They've been out of the corrections facility for 2 weeks, and they're told by their parole officer that they have to come here. You guys talk about the psychological message of telling someone they're not college ready. We inadvertently deliver the psychological message, you're not really society ready. We don't want you. Because they come in and they say, we need help, and we say, here are 37 forms. And then they say, well, I can't really read. And we say, oh, well, then I have a 5-page form for you. That's fine. You're welcome. That's only 5 pages of information that you can't navigate. And so the clutter is rich. And now all of this, of course, is very well intended. Our goal is to be helpful. But we have not coordinated our efforts within our own agency, right? We have probably 31 different one-stop career centers throughout the state, some of which you all have direct interaction with, some you don't. But I can tell you that those 31 one-stops don't have a tremendous amount of interaction with each other. There are different county policies on the county side. There are different workforce development policies trickling down from our central office in Trenton. And we are owning that reality, right? My agency's goal is to eliminate that clutter, build continuity, build consistency, not only amongst our one-stop career centers, but across the New Jersey workforce system as a whole, of which we are partners. Right? The New Jersey one-stop system is not just the Department of Labor and Workforce Development. It's not just K-12. It's not just higher ed. It's all of us. And Larry has done a tremendous job, and I'm grateful for it, of bringing my agency to the council table and vice versa, and identifying opportunities for us to align our organizational efforts, our efforts to eliminate the clutter, to help create clear guidance and steps that lead, right? We're spokes on a pathway. We're spokes on the wheel. Where our collective customers interact with us may be different throughout their career, but there should be a connection that we're able to make clear to them. Where we've started to adopt a very simple 3-pronged approach to customer service at the Department of Labor. And we are in the development stage with this now. I'm meeting this afternoon, which is why my schedule is so tight. I'm meeting this afternoon, a very first meeting with our new technology vendor, who is hopefully going to turn our disheveled, disorganized, unsearchable website into something more along the lines of what Arizona State has produced. And that kickoff meeting starts this afternoon. And Larry, through the council, has identified a number of members of your community who are going to be a part of that work group to help us get that started. So we're really aligning formally the work that we're attempting to do on the workforce development side and the work that you guys are all doing from the community college perspective. So we try to look at our service model in 3 ways. Very simple. Plan, prepare, succeed. That's the messaging. All of these 75 different programs, all of our other training seminars, all of our different Jersey job clubs that we do, they all have a role in this. And you all have a role in it, right? Because if someone comes to us and part of their plan is that they need educational steps, well, where are they going to go, right? We've talked about the proprietary schools. They're one option, and that's a mixed bag. I think Rob and Davis have been kind in their analysis. But one thing that they do very well, and I think we have to adopt this mentality, is the proprietary schools have a very, very clear for-profit motive. And that drives them to think very differently about the user experience. It drives them to think differently about how they communicate, how they structure. The quality of the work almost has become secondary to how effectively they package it and message it. We have that responsibility, right? I don't work for a for-profit entity. I work for the state. But we have an obligation to adopt a for-profit mentality of being efficient in our efforts, communicating and coordinating effectively with all of the partners that touch our work, and thinking about the user experience. What message do we send to our clients at every interaction? Do we tell them that you're not college material? Do we tell them society doesn't want you? Or do we say, thanks for coming in. Thanks for taking this bold step forward. Let's help you get where you want to be. So we have, in many ways, inadvertently become part of the problem together. And through the work that the Department of Labor and Workforce Development is doing through the Community College Council and aligning our efforts, I look very much forward to being part of the solution together. Thank you.
I had a couple conversations over lunch, and one thing I usually do at the start of these presentations and the end when we make this case for guided pathways is tell you that we've never been more optimistic than we are at this point in where we are in the community college landscape, that we are on the cusp of fundamentally changing the conditions for millions of students around the country. I mean, you have to remember what's at stake here. You guys do on a day-to-day basis, but this is about student lives, and it's not hyperbole to say it's the economic bridge to sustainability for millions of students in this country, and maybe we haven't done as good a job as we can. We've done a lot, but what we're seeing is, and I also work on the Aspen Prize for Community College Excellence, and Davis was a site visitor this year. We were involved in the site visit process in all the top 10 schools all 3 years. So we've seen a lot of what happens at colleges who have some really excellent things going on. Santa Fe this year in Florida had a pretty good foundation before they came into this cycle, added a maniacal focus on guided pathways to it. We're seeing colleges move the needle. I think the question is, can we step to the side over here and say, what can we do to change the conditions and structures and policies? And what we're seeing from colleges who've started doing this is we are seeing those changes. I mean, the Georgia State story is not about going from a number, 31 to 55. It's about 24 more students out of 100 getting degrees that get them into the workforce and earning a sustainable wage. That's what's at stake here. But the optimism side is we can do it, right? And we've seen, Davis has been doing this because he's a lot older than I am, a lot longer than I have, right? He's been talking about this for a long time, and I've only been talking about it for much less of a time, but neither one of us has seen the field ready for this. And by the way, there's hard work ahead of you if you're going to do this, right? There's tough conversations. There's hard design work. Don't lose the eyes on the prize piece of this, which is that you have to fundamentally believe this can happen, that you can go from whatever your rate is today to 20 points higher than it is now. City College of Chicago's already done it, right? It's a very challenging starting environment. They've moved in the direction now. They're 20 points higher. Georgia State's done it. And again, those aren't points. Those are students. And on the low-income side, just one last thing on the low-income side. There's data that we've come across, and when I worked on this by the way, that low-income toolkit I talked about, we'll get you the link when it comes out in a couple weeks through Yesenia and Lou. There's some data on the low-income students, which is really interesting, which is if you look at college graduation rates by income quartile. It's a pretty fascinating set of studies here. And just for a second, one of the ones I happen to remember off the top of my head is, if you look at the highest income quartile and divide people into low and high test scores using SAT or ACT, not big fans of that as a sorting mechanism, but just for the purposes of this, take the highest test score group, high income students. They graduate college close to 80% of the time. You know what the rate is for the lowest income quartile, high test score students? By the way, not relative to their group, same test scores. Not relative to their group down here, same exact test scores. You know what their graduation rate is? 26%. 26% of high test score, low income students graduate college in the same time frame. So you talk about, so there's a huge problem, right? The depressing part of that is, wow, that's a really big problem. But it suggests one really important feature. This is not about students who can't do it. There's this fundamental assumption, by the way, it's one of my 10 questions, that college is a meritocracy where our job is to help the strong succeed and weed out the weak. And you don't hear this out loud as much anymore, right? I used to hear it out loud, by the way, occasionally. That's the job of higher ed. Well, even if that was the job, which I don't think many of us think it is, we're not doing a good job of it if only 25% of highly qualified low-income students are graduating college. And we believe, by the way, and one of the things in this toolkit you'll see, that the work of guided pathways is one of many strategies to work on how to help low-income students actually achieve rates at a higher one. And the reason this is important to you on many fronts is this is where the leverage is. The leverage, by the way, is not in any 100 students who come to your college. You're graduating of the top 20, 19 of them right now. You could do whatever the hell you wanted. You'd still graduate 9. You could not offer courses. The 19 would figure out how to graduate, right? You could not even do anything. The bottom 15 or 20, I don't know what the number is, you're graduating 1 right now. And you're going to do everything you want in the world, and you're maybe going to graduate 2 or 3 of them. There's the middle 60, and at most colleges right now, you graduate 10 of them. That's where the leverage is, right? That's where you can affect people with the type of things we're talking about here today, in terms of the guided pathways approaches, getting students into programs of study, better defining them, monitoring their progress, making sure they're learning, the stuff that you can take on in this. You can get many more of that middle 60 to graduate. And I think we're seeing this from the numbers. There's a lot of leverage here. It's not in finding more of the top students, or by the way, I don't know what we're going to do with the bottom 10 or 15 students in our college. It's a really tough moral discussion. But if we pool all of our resources there, we're still going to graduate 10 of that middle 60. Right? That's where the leverage is. And so before I hand it to Davis and the conversations, we hope you leave today with a sense of optimism that while this is hard work, it's not only possible, but if you do it with fidelity and over time and you keep updating what you do and you learn from your mistakes and you design at scale, that you actually can do what you're hearing about at these other colleges. There's nothing special about Georgia State. By the way, Georgia State students, they're in downtown Atlanta. It's an urban college that looks a lot like our students. City College of Chicago, I mean, it's hard to find a more challenging population than what they're dealing with. Hostos in New York up the road here, who started down this path in the Bronx. Challenging population, quote unquote, starting to see movement because they're taking some of these principles and putting them into practice. So I just wanted to do that before Davis came up.
So let me talk about the cost because the president asked me. I was the lead author in the book on the chapter on costs. And at AACC, Rolando Montoya, who's provost at Miami-Dade, talked about costs. The good thing was that what he indicated was pretty much what we had concluded in our cost chapter. He just said it a lot more clearly than I did and was much more succinct. And what he said is, and this is Miami-Dade College, the largest community college in the country, which has implemented this across 9 campuses and fundamentally redesigned their intake process, their advising, so that it extends into the high school first year experience, or into the initial advising, and then into the programs. And by the way, their faculty is unionized. They don't have advising as part of their contract, but they've created faculty coaches and mentors with the union to play this role of helping guide students in a union shop where the advising is not part of the faculty load in the contract. So he said there are things that colleges can do that don't require money, and there are things that require money. The things that require money Review programs to make sure they lead to good opportunities to transfer at junior status into jobs in demand. I'm reading from his notes. Consider closing or consolidating programs with few graduates or for which there is not strong demand. Map out the sequence of courses for every program, including transfer paths. They can include electives, but right now too many students are paying for courses that don't get them to where they want to go. Block schedule courses to make it easier for students to take a full load of 15 credits, or if they're part-time, at least 8 credits. Increase faculty and instructor utilization so you don't have small sections. Restructure the intake system with mandatory advising. Again, they have 170,000 students. Require students to enter a program from the start, reorganize advisors, and embed them in the program areas. Miami-Dade, with the Florida law, which has made DevEd and placement testing optional, has seen drops of 40% in their DevEd enrollments. And again, they have tens of thousands of students in DevEd, but they have redirected those resources to working with faculty. Both the DevEd faculty have retrained to teach college-level courses or to teach the co-requisite like ALP courses, and redeployed their tutoring centers so that they're much more directly involved, a required piece of the classes, not something where you recommend that the student go to the reading center, but you never know if they show up. And by the way, the faculty isn't always working with the tutors in the reading center to make sure what they're covering is what they're covering in class. So much closer connection. Use dual enrollment more strategically, get students into program of study. We showed that Lorraine advan. Set up college prep activities, early testing, FAFSA fairs in the K-12 schools. And this is a key one for them, which is not free, which is free monetarily, but not free politically. Cultivate a culture where faculty take more responsibility for helping guide students to further education and careers. The things that cost money, now for the bad news. Hiring additional advisors. Miami-Dade hired 25 new, it's a huge school, 25 new master's level advisors, because he said Guided Pathways transforms the role of the advisors from a glorified scheduling clerk to a career and college advisor. What they were trained to do, we were talking about this, what they have master's degrees and what we're paying them to do. However, it's a very different role. And the reason Miami-Dade hired more advisors was because their retention rate went up 8% and they generated enough tuition to be able to hire this. The other expense is their ERP system. In Miami-Dade, they're investing $50 million over several years on this and upgrading the tracking system. So those are the big costs. They're not insignificant. So what we've said in the book, bottom line, is that implementing guided pathways decreases the cost per completion, which is what we want. It better utilizes our resources to help students complete. It will increase the cost per student, but given the return to society and given how many students are, getting discouraged along the way who don't need to be, we think that it's a huge payoff, both monetarily, but ultimately in terms of human terms as well. And obviously Miami-Dade does too. And he's the guy, by the way, who does the numbers. So I guess it's okay to talk about costs. Miami-Dade, though, shows that it's possible, even in a massive institution. And we have examples where it's been done in a small institution, too, which also has its challenges. So the task here is really to turn this back over to you to discuss among you and your colleagues. And if you have university partners there, please include them to talk about whether this would make sense for your college at this point. As Gretchen said from the start, this is a heavy lift. We're talking about, the book is called Redesigning. We're not talking about just putting in student success courses and making orientation mandatory, although those are a key part of it. They're part of this larger restructuring of getting the faculty and advisors to map out the programs, making sure that they transfer with junior standing and meet employer needs, and then building an on-ramp and tracking students through. So the first, there are a number of steps, and you have in your thing a a practitioner packet that has 3 sections. You don't need, if you read this, you really don't need to buy the book, so I should tell you that. You can buy Rob's free toolkit.
You already gave him your book anyway.
Okay, yeah, okay. So the first one is on the research. The second one is a case study of Miami-Dade. Just because part of this, as we were discussing at lunch, is really doing something community colleges and universities generally aren't well trained to do, which is manage large-scale change. But the key to managing large-scale change, and this is the third section, which is about implementation, is about engaging people. Engaging people in believing that what we're talking about is not something that some outside researcher or the president wants to do, but that this will be good for your students. Engagement is key because, as we were discussing before, you got to have collaboration across the institution. So what everyone has done that has succeeded in this that I've seen is go through an initial process of engagement. And this is something you could do in the fall. And the kinds of questions that we've developed to help guide this process, you can make up your own and send them to us, we'd be interested, is on page 3 of that last section. And it breaks out into, these are reflection questions, the 4 big buckets of guided pathways. The first is clarifying the path. The second is helping students choose and get on a path. The third is helping students stay on the path and complete. And the fourth is ensuring students are learning. These are the kinds of questions that folks in this initial process of engagement, if you're thinking about doing it, really, have you guys done this kind of thing?
I'm from Cumberland County College in Vineland, New Jersey. So we started by bringing Rob to the campus.
You said she started slow by bringing Rob to the campus.
Yeah, right.
That's how they roll at Cumberland County.
Right. You know, and what it did was it started the conversation because we needed a starting point. We knew where we wanted to go with this, but you have to involve the entire campus. And so what we've been working on for the last 6 months is really looking at the whole advisement piece and what's working. And what we've discovered is advisement is not working. So that's good because now it's like, okay, we have to change. And academically, we have decided that students are just picking courses and spinning around the college, and we're increasing our completion rates, but we have higher goals than what we're doing. So now they're ready to embark on the structured pathway. So we're ready. Actually, our academic deans and I are meeting next week to start this setup of the structured pathways, and then within the fall we'll get the faculty to work with us because they have to help us with the courses that are appropriate for those programs of study. Yeah. And it's a hard conversation. Some people on the campus have realized that those classes that were nice to teach and that I like to teach, we may not be teaching anymore.
Why not?
Well, because they don't fit into an academic structured pathway. Yeah, and they don't transfer. So we're still a year into it, and we're still working on it.
Sometimes I talk to everyone at once, which I like better. Sometimes I talk in groups, like I talk to student services, then faculty, then administration. And generally, one of the things that will happen when that happens is you'll go to the faculty group. Actually, start with administration. Go to administration first, and they get, these are wonderful ideas. If you could just convince our faculty of this, then we would be in great shape. We could redesign the college. Then you go to the faculty group. You present to them, and the faculty group says, you know, we really like these ideas. If you could just fix student services with this, everything would be fine. And you go to student services, and they're like, man, those, they say faculty and administrators, if you can fix them. So everyone, so part of this is just classic organizational psychology, right? It's the somebody else's problem. Faculty are very willing for you to fix your advising process because it doesn't affect them most times. Student services are very willing to have you fix guided pathways most times because it doesn't affect how they advise. And then there's the administrators who, you know, by the way, one of the interesting stories from Miami-Dade was they did a lot of work on the faculty and student services side, and they left out one key group, which was the middle managers.
The deans are critical.
And so you need those folks. And by the way, in an organization, there's the ones who have, I mean, they're screwed, right? They get the stuff from above, they get the stuff from below. You better make sure they're on board, right? They're dealing with full-time faculty, part-time faculty, students, and then they're getting their VP on. So they're right in the middle. They got to be on board too. So, I mean, I think one of the things Jackie's talking about was a campus-wide discussion about this. The more cross-functional it is, the better.
The better. And the more questions that come out that are hard questions, the better. If they're not asking questions, that means they're disengaged. They're not asking questions about this, there's something wrong, because we have a lot of questions that we can't answer.
Yeah, but one thing on those questions, by the way, this is another plug for a free resource. I'm just saying, that's all I'm saying. Completionbydesign.org has a series of blogs on it, and in that series of blogs, I've gone through the 10 questions that we get most commonly about pathways, and just not trying to convince anyone, just providing an alternate perspective on it. 7 of the 10 are done on there in 5 different blog posts. I'm finishing the other 3 this time. So they're all on completionbydesign.org. You will hear some, or you should, as Davis said, hear nearly every one of these questions, right? Because if you're not hearing them, there's
a problem.
Don't believe that this is actually going to happen. If you're not hearing the questions, it means they think this is just the next acronym. Gretchen, you got to...
We have artificial barriers that we put in place at our institutions that prevent our students from being most successful. We put institutional policies and business practices in place to help us, not to help our students be successful. And so we've developed processes that really work really great for our back-end room processing parts of things, but are really, really, really significant barriers to our students. And until you start asking those questions and saying, what are we doing and why, and how is this impacting our students, and fixing it so that students have the most seamless, efficient process interacting with your institution. And as you make changes, if you don't change institutional policy and practice around the changes that you make, they're not going to be sustained, because everybody's going to go right back to the old way of doing things because it's enculturated and it's built into your systems. And so people will default to the system that existed before you started making the change. And so you have to keep track of that as you go along. And we have, back to the free resource, we have a short version of an institutional policy audit that we've done at a much larger scale at some colleges in Ohio and North Carolina that I can send Jacinia and Lou the link to, and you're all welcome to use it. And it's at least an opening to the conversation about what you're doing and how it interacts with students and why, and places where you may want to make changes in order to make sure that this works.
Jackie and these guys have done year 1, the engagement. This next year, like she's saying, the key thing is the redesigning, is designing the maps with the faculty in the fall so that they'll be ready in January and February for the catalog for next fall of 2016. So, and then redesigning the intake process to get students on that pathway. There's a question about the tracking systems. Many of these institutions, including Miami-Dade and city colleges, actually implemented pathways before they had the tracking system, which in some ways operationally was extremely challenging. On the other hand, it was great because everyone understood what the technology was about. I was just at the city colleges in April, and they had implemented the new system in March. And yes, there were huge numbers of problems with the new PeopleSoft system, but everyone sees the purpose, and everyone sees how, once they get the bugs worked out, it is going to be great, because it auto-loads the maps for students and the advisors. It allows you to do what-ifs. But they didn't lead with the technology. They led with the program, because that's what matters most. So in the next hour, we'd encourage you to give some thought. If this is the process, a year, so spending, if next year doing engagement around the kinds of questions, like Jackie raised or like are raised on this page 3, with as broad an interdisciplinary group as possible, as often as possible, and really be ready to have people ask hard questions. But try to keep bringing it back is, how does this enable our students to complete degrees that enable them to move up in the job market, and as part of that, advance efficiently to further education careers? That's and learn. Now, again, we're not just talking about empty certificates. really are learning so that they can succeed once they go to the university and in the workplace. We'll circulate around, but the key here is to really figure out, and again, it might not be for any number of reasons, accreditation visits, whatever, the time, or maybe you want to think about doing this in a year or two. That's fine. In fact, the student success people are talking about phasing this in. We'll circulate around, but give this an hour and give it some thought.
We struggled a bit about how you phase in the program, especially when a significant culture change would be needed.
From what I've seen, it takes 2 to 3 years to lay the groundwork in an institution to do any kind of change, including like a new technology or learning communities or something like that. 2 or 3 years. But they can be really edifying 2 or 3 years where it's like you start to talk about stuff like those questions that we haven't talked about in a long time that really matter. I think it's a useful exercise, unless things are just too contentious that just to start having the conversations. And I would not jump into this thing without having those conversations and getting the pulse of where people are. You're not going to succeed. If you want to go, as I was saying over here, I think it's also edifying if you can do this engagement to have the mapping process, even if you don't act on it, because I guarantee you, once faculty and advisors start mapping out the student experience, there's the barriers are so obvious, and some are easy to fix, that it will happen, even if it's not wholesale. Monica pointed out that this doesn't have to be a whole institution change, that you can start with an area where there's buy-in. If your business programs really want to do this, we've seen that happen. They'll do it. Miami-Dade started with healthcare, which was already sort of their business, because this was following a year or two of reorganization, and there was real new leadership, and STEM, because they've had a real focus on STEM. And you can't do STEM in community colleges without really doing this, because the quality of the instruction and the level of instruction really does have to be at the lower division, up to the university standards. And to do that with students who are not academically prepared, I just came from an institution, Holyoke Community College, working with its universities that does that. It can be done, but it's a big undertaking. So, is that? Yes, it helps. I don't want to lie to you. This is not a quick fix.
Sinclair took the mapping in the beginning and mapped 128 programs in 2 years. Their faculty were on board. Their president was on board. They did 128, and they did it in stages, and they took the most willing first, and then the second most willing when people figured out the process, and then left the straggling programs to the end and kind of dragged them through. I did a presentation 2.5 years ago at Lorain Community College where the chair of their faculty senate stood up and told me that they would never do this at Lorain, and that they would revise intake, and they talk about their transfer programs, and they talk about workforce, and they talk about labor market data and all that stuff, but that they weren't going to start messing around with the stuff that's within the realm of the faculty. And now Marcia knew she had to do it very thoughtfully and deliberately. She's got a champion. She's the provost. She brought him in. And now she's got them where now all those are mapped. They're doing away with courses in their course file. They are building a structure for all their programs at their college. But it took her 2.5 years.
So let's consider about 10 years out from now. Do you have any data, statistics, or research? Because I'm sure as you've looked at community colleges like the ones that are represented here, or ones from certain areas, what if we don't do it? What if we decide to stay the way most of us are? Then 10 years from now, what does our graduation rates look like? What do our societies look like?
Do you want me to give my financing doom and gloom speech now, and then you can talk about this? I said before that I avoided the financing doom and gloom speech in the beginning that I normally give, but so it is very likely in 10 years that there will be a significant portion of community colleges in the country that will no longer exist. There is not enough enrollment. High school enrollment's down, the economy's better. You're not going to get your money from front door enrollment anymore. It is just not going to happen, right? And so there is a point where the tuition elasticity is going to, the elasticity in the raising tuition is going to stop, and the state financing is going down and enrollment is going down. So it is going to not just be a moral and ethical imperative for the success of your students in order to do this, which should be enough, but it's not enough for everybody. So go beyond the moral and ethical. The only way you're going to make your money on enrollment now is the throughput, not the input. So it's more students getting further along into your institutions, taking upper division 200 level courses and taking more of them. That is how you're going to keep your doors open pretty soon. So there is a fiscal imperative to this that is beyond the moral imperative. Ohio just went to 100% performance-based funding. If you don't think that this is beyond a moral imperative for their presidents now, it is there's already 2 colleges in Ohio that have combined. 2 rural colleges in Ohio saw the writing on the wall. They were both going to go under. Not one or the other. They were both going to go under in the next 5 years if they didn't combine. This is going to be a fiscal reality for community colleges sooner than it's going to be a moral and ethical imperative for all of you.
I'm more optimistic, actually, because I think we're starting to see cases where institutions, especially in partnership with universities and hungry universities that are facing the exact same issues, and with employers and with their K-12 schools, are really moving the needle on student success, really helping students achieve their dreams. And the work that they're doing, from the accounts that I've heard, is the most exciting work of their careers, because it's not, in some ways it's not such a big deal. It's sort of stepping back and saying, okay, what's your field? What's your field? Yeah. Okay, so if someone came to you and said, I really want to get into creative writing and the humanities, I'm interested in pursuing that in college, what should I do? And you would tell me the kind of courses I should take, but you would also tell me extracurricular activities I should do and theater writing and the like. That's what we're talking about. That's what we're talking about, documenting as policy established by faculty and advisors what you would advise your own kids, or not your own kids because they won't listen, but your neighbor's kids, what you would advise your neighbor's kids or your neighbor to do if they wanted to pursue. And English and humanities, that's a vast field, like design or engineer. All these fields are vast, and they're all going to be changed in 5 years. But what you want is I really think that 200 level, you want to get students to a point where they're meeting someone like you who knows the field, who has connections both within the academy and within the field and within nonprofits and with theater groups and with community organizations. That's what I'm talking about. It's not some bureaucratic pathway. It's about creating a better structure for the kind of human connection and learning that is the only way that we're going to really help elevate our students.
There's 3 of us here. There's over 400 full-time faculty and staff at our college. How do we go back and start the dialogue to convince them that this is the way to go?
You could point out that students are having trouble, are confused, that you're finding that students are confused. And if you want to do some research, you can do some focus groups with them. I would also suggest do some focus groups with students at your university partners who are at your institution, and ask them what they would recommend, what they wish they had known now, back then. Maybe I'm wrong. But when we've done it, when Public Agenda done it, when Kay McClenny's done it, students are, when Rob and his group at RP group, they asked students, what would it take to succeed? And they were basically saying, a map. I can direct you to the study. Students, like, it's almost religious. Show me the way. Show me a path. At least show me the options. So one thing you could do is, is there interest even within a particular area to start mapping out what it would take. And you need to ensure that a couple things. You need to ensure that it aligns with the requirements for transfer with junior standing and with your employer requirements, that it's educationally coherent, that the courses in it are sequenced, and that they can be electives, but they have to be electives that make sense educationally and that will transfer or that employers want, not because someone wants to teach the course. And there has to be some way, this sort of on-ramp, this exploratory major, how would they design that for their field? To give students a taste of their field, not dump a bunch of information, but give students a taste of their field. We've seen this in the case, like, did I say Miami-Dade start? Yeah, so they started out in these 3 areas. Business was an area where they were doing reorganization, and it seemed like a logical place. If you're not ready for those conversations, I would suggest doing some student focus groups and running some data on what happens to your students when they transfer, and how many transfer without completing the gen ed core and getting an associate degree, which is the majority of the students who transfer, I'm almost sure. Is that right? Yeah. So I'm pointing to the IR guy. So does that make sense? I don't see, we're not talking about, we're talking about making the curriculum more coherent. We're not talking about a radical, we're talking about taking what's in faculty's minds and what they would recommend informally and codifying it. And then see where it goes. See, take the maps to the faculty. You don't have to, colleges that have done this have gone that far, even departments have found it very edifying, because you start to see places where unnecessarily you're screening out students from your program, and no one wants that, especially when enrollments are down.
I'm wondering if this is the model that the proprietary schools use, why are their outcomes so poor? And if we were to emulate what the proprietary school model of, guided program pathways,
the proprietary's outcomes stink because they rely so much on online. The in-person proprietaries, especially those that are well connected with employers, actually have very good outcomes. But this isn't exactly the proprietary model. This is they don't take all takers usually, or they claim they don't. They're not, their focus is not to provide a broad liberal education connected with degrees. So you have a different mission. This kind of exploratory major idea, that's not part of the proprietaries. They offer very strict, well-structured programs for students who know what they want. This is a process that's truly educative, that community colleges is part of your mission, and part of the liberal arts tradition too, by the way, is this exploration. It's just not letting students explore on their own. So on one hand, there's the structure, but in this case, this is really scaffolding and educating students to their choices rather than just running them through a gauntlet of a real structure.
I was just going to respond to the question about how to get started. And at our table, we're at Essex County College. I think we came up with 2 ideas. Number one is we're never going to use the words guided pathway.
Good.
One more buzzword encrusted program, and I think our faculty are going to puke.
Yeah.
And a lot of these easily fit within our strategic plan. And so it's easy to just say, hey, we're now in year 3 of the strategic plan. Student success is our first goal, which I'm sure comes as a shock to everybody. And we can easily subsume many of these activities within our existing structure without using, it's not a new program. No, this is just, the next stage of our strategic plan. No drama here. Let's just keep going.
That's right.
I'm sorry, and we're going to exceed expectations, which I'm sure is new for you.
Yeah.
So there's a no drama approach. I like it. I also don't like, the guided pathways thing.
Making this into first of all, it's bigger than an initiative.
Yeah.
And second of all, as soon as you attach it to an initiative, everybody's waiting for it to go away. And so, so I think that you have to talk about this as rethinking how students move through our institution with the end in mind, and give it to the faculty to own.
I was just curious if you approach online degrees any differently
You
or
have to,
online courses.
the people who do online well that have, like Rio Salata, that have decent outcomes, and there are not many of them, approach it very similarly. In fact, St. Petersburg came to this in part because they revamped. They have the largest on. They found they have the realized they have the largest online deliverer in Florida among the community colleges, and they thought the quality of their online was lacking because they really hadn't reviewed it, and went through a big review, and many of these same issues of pathways and the advising are what they had to do. And then they asked, well, how come we're not doing this for our conventional classrooms?
So when I sent out the draft agenda, I did not share some exciting news, and that is that NJ Transfer has decided to partner with us. And the reason for that is because as we're talking about these transfer pathways, the same way that we thought it would be good for the Department of Labor and Workforce to be part of this conversation as it relates to careers and jobs, we thought, well, who knows transfer better than transfer folks, right? So they're going to be putting together a small group of people from the colleges so that we can start having a conversation about where there might be some barriers and where they can lend their expertise because this is their life. And so I'm very excited to tell you that the Center for Student Success, NJCCC, and NJ Transfer will be partnering in this work moving forward. And here is Linda Trump to tell you more. She's the Associate Director.
Thank you. I have to be very honest, when Yesenia first called our offices and asked about our interest in guided pathways, I'm like, I don't even know what they are. And so we met with Yesenia and Larry and Lou, and we learned a little bit about it, and we were very excited about it because it does fit into what we're doing too. And then here today, I have to say this was a mind-blowing learning experience for me. I don't know how you feel, but I mean, I've learned so much here today, and it just seems to me it's a no-brainer to say why don't we do this? I mean, I know it's difficult. I know faculty can be difficult. We work with faculty a lot, but it is just a perfect way to show. And I apologize to any faculty in the audience. I'm sorry, but it is just a great way to help students move through the community college into the four-year institutions for those who want to go into a transfer track program, or move them onto a career for those who want to do a two-year career program. I hope everybody here knows what NJ Transfer is, but I'll just briefly tell you that we are an initiative, and fortunately, we've been around for a while, initiative of the New Jersey President's Council. We are fully funded by the 19 community colleges and the 25 four-year public and private institutions who participate. So basically, we work for all of you in this room. We right now maintain a website called NJ Transfer, where we have a database of all of the community college courses offered by the two-year institutions and how they transfer to the four-year participating institutions. We also provide what we call recommended transfer programs that outline the first 2 years of the requirements of all the four-year colleges majors, and then we also facilitate the exchange of electronic transcripts. The software package that we use in many ways is very helpful, but it does have some limitations. And so one of the things that we're excited about working with Yesenia and her group about this is how can we use what we have but change it a little bit to reflect the guided pathways. The recommended transfer programs we know do have some limitations, and what we're hoping to do, we're meeting with our software vendor in probably early next week, and we want to change what they look like to reflect what a guided pathway would look like so that we can spell out semester by semester what the student would take and hopefully guide them through that. One of the things that we're very excited about doing right now, we just spoke to Elizabeth Giardinelli from Ryder yesterday. She called us. They have just completed a significant number of articulation agreements with Brookdale. They're going to be working on some with Burlington. I spoke to Pat Noonan, who's here today from William Patterson, and they are working on a significant number of articulation agreements. And we will be able to post those agreements as college-specific RTPs on NJ Transfer. So it's kind of blending the 2 and 4 together, but it's leading the students through graduation at the 2-year and then into junior status. One of the things that we know, we have the Lampet legislation in New Jersey, but that only goes so far. That's really a framework. And it's really up to the colleges then to work out how that framework applies to the transfer from the 2 to the 4-year. We also know, like, for example, with Ryder, they're targeting schools where they see a significant number of transfer students. And so that may be a place to start. And then they're narrowing it a little further to the programs that their students seem to be transferring into. So we're going to be working with them. We are certainly going to be working with Pat and William Patterson. And if there are any other 4-year schools in the audience who are working on articulation agreements, we would want to start working with you too. And we're going to continue to work with Yesenia and her group, and to try and see how we can take what we have at NJ Transfer and make it work for the guided pathways. And if anyone out here has suggestions too, please contact us. The other thing I would say is if you're from an institution and you're not real familiar with what NJ Transfer is, we would be more than happy to come to your institution and do a presentation, whether that be for your administrators, your faculty, your advisors, whatever. We recently visited Union County College and Sussex County College. We're going to be going to Mercer Community College in the fall. So we're very happy to do that. And we are really very excited about this program because we do believe it does fit very well with what we are trying to do with NJ Transfer. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, I know I'm standing between you and going home. So I will let you do that. And thank you so much.